Hello. You join us in the workshop today, and as always it's windy, so as always please forgive the creaks and groans and rattles of an old building. We're going to cover saddle soap making today, and a lot of the techniques we're going to use we've used previously in our video on how to make beeswax furniture polish. I'll pop a link in. If you haven't watched that one, I suggest you watch that one first because it'll cover things like double boilers and why we use them. Just 4 ingredients today, some of which we've talked about and used before, some of which we haven't. We're going to use water, we're going to use beeswax, and again use the pelleted variety or a grated amount if you can. We're going to use soap, and I'm very happy to show you how we make soap, but in the meantime, if you want to get on with this recipe, buy some plain soap without the sort of gritty exfoliant type material in them that's good for scrubbing away dead skin, because that'll scratch up whatever leather you apply this product to. So just use a plain simple soap. Please never buy soap made with palm oil because it's killing the rainforests and horrible stuff. The last product that we're going to include is something called Neatsfoot oil. Neatsfoot oil is made of byproducts of the cattle industry. It's almost unique in that it's an animal fat that doesn't set at room temperature. And it's tremendously useful in that when absorbed into leather, it makes stiff leather flexible. So if you've got something like a pair of boots that have got soaked and have gone rock hard, or a pair of new boots that want softenings because they're starting to get blisters, Neatsfoot oil is great stuff. Don't overuse Neatsfoot oil because it can rot natural stitching and even over soften the leather. So something like a wet formed knife sheath, you don't want to use Neatsfoot oil on because it'll make it all soft and floppy, and that's the last thing that you want. So use it appropriately. If you want all the cleaning powers of this saddle soap that we're going to make, but you don't want a softening component, use mineral oil instead of Neatsfoot oil in exactly the same proportions. And if you're not aware of how to get mineral oil in the UK, baby oil. It works absolutely great. It doesn't have the softening effect of Neatsfoot oil. So let's have a look at the ingredients. Let's talk about the proportions and have a quick look at how we combine them to make saddle soap. Right, this recipe is an entirely volume-based recipe, so there's nothing to weigh, nothing like that. And it works very simply, 10, 3, 2, 1. 10 parts water, 3 parts soap, 2 parts beeswax, 1 part Neatsfoot oil. So in this pan, it's just heating, I have 1 litre, 1,000 millilitres of water. And to that water, I'm going to add 300 mils of grated soap. I've grated it because it takes forever to dissolve in bar form. No other reason. But as you can see, in hot water, grated soap has a large surface area and dissolves relatively quickly. I'm not going to make you sit through it. I'm going to get that dissolved and we'll move on to the next stage. So, the soap is completely dissolved in the water. It only takes a few minutes. Start with boiling water or near boiling water, and the soap will completely dissolve. You can see there's no lumps in there. And what we now need to do is to melt our wax and oil together. As we talked about in previous videos, a double boiler is the way to go. Don't worry if you haven't got a fancy one. Just use something like a glass bowl, a glass jug, etc. So, 200 ml beeswax, 100 ml of Neatsfoot oil. And again, the advantage of the double boiler is that you cannot make these hot enough to catch fire. You may notice that I put the double boiler over the water containing the soap. That's fine, I could boil some separate water if I wanted to, but to be honest, all that this double boiler requires is some hot water. Well, we've got hot water, so I tend to, when I'm making saddle soap, I just tend to use that as the heat source for the double boiler. So we'll let the oil and wax melt together and come back shortly. So we have melted oil and wax in the top. We have water, which is dissolved soap in the bottom. Now normally, I'm sure you remember, oil and water don't mix. But soap will allow them to mix. They won't dissolve, but they will mix. And the reason is that a soap iron attracts oil at one end and water at the other end. So by putting those soap into the water, you can actually finely mix rather than dissolve the wax and oil with the water. So once it's melted, gently just pour it in, and you can see it's not forming a scum on the top. The two have mixed very nicely. Give that a quick stir just to ensure that it's mixed fully. And turn the heat off. Allow that to cool a bit, but not much. You want it still liquid when we pour it into the jars. We'll do that in a moment. So if you remember from the polish video, when I'm pouring this type of material, I like to use an old worn out jam funnel. Just makes it easier to get it in the jar. If you've got a steady hand, you don't need one. Gloves on for this, just because we're dealing with hot stuff. And bear in mind, this is no hotter than boiling water. You know, we're not dealing with something that's like boiling oil here. But you will see, if you look at the lip of the pan there, that it sets quite quickly. So you don't want to leave it too long before you pour your saddle soap mixture into the jars. Just a note of caution. You will get separation as this mixture cures. Just keep stirring it. It'll skewer or something like that in the jar. And as it gets to a certain point of thickness, it will stop separating. But it's almost inevitable in a mixture like this, you'll get some separation. So, as you can see, it doesn't take a lot. Just to give it a stir every few minutes to ensure it remains fully mixed. When your saddle soap has had time to cool, this is what it'll look like. It has the consistency of probably, I don't know, jelly, soft butter, thick yogurt, that sort of level. Now, if you want a harder saddle soap, just reduce the water. Drop the water down to about 7 parts compared to the 3, 2 and 1, and you'll get a hard bar. 8.5, that'll give you a much thicker, harder. I like this to be relatively soft because it absorbs well. My boots, you can see, dirty, scuffed. Just take some saddle soap. If you're worried about it, put it on with a cloth or a toothbrush. Me, I use my hand. We know what's in this stuff. We made it. There's nothing harmful to humans in there. Not like some of this sort of chemically adulterated nonsense made with goodness knows what. Rub it in. Now, I'm going to speed this process up. When I do this for myself, I rub all over the top and I let it soak in for an hour or two and then I buff it up. But for your benefit, just to show how quickly this stuff works, look at that. Now already these boots are dark and nourished. If we leave it a little longer, let it dry, we can buff it up to a dull shine. Again, we can add other waxes if we want to make a high shine polish. But as you can see, very quickly Saddle soap really does fix your dried out, hard, dirty leather. Hope that was interesting. I'd like to show you lots of other stuff like this. So things like how to make the soap to begin with. So much of what we use day to day we can make for ourselves, and we can make it to a better quality exactly for the purposes that we need. If you like this sort of household items video, please click the thumbs up and please leave us a comment telling us what you'd like to see next. I've got a pair of boots to clean, so I'd better get on with that. You have a lovely day, and we'll talk soon.